Dobré odpoledne, dámy a pánové. Robert Fulghum. Do you remember Beatlemania?
Beatlemania?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems we have
there.
Fulghum mania.
Let me say something that's very important to me. I know that you came to see me, but you have to know that I came to see you. And I'm so glad to see you.
So all is set. We can sit down. With the respect to our guest, we are going to speak English, even though you consider yourself a Czech writer now.
Oh, omlouvám se, nemluvám česky. How many of you speak English? Look at that. It's no problem anymore.
Yeah,
We're all English speaking. So,
plus,
yeah, look at that.
There's
And
a
we have
hard-working
this-
lady at the back.
The magicians. This is like science fiction, isn't it? Amazing.
Yeah. Someone's reading your mind.
Yeah, that's scary. It's like having my wife running a machine.
Did you check at the back?
No, it's true that I began to think differently about myself as an author because I now have 7 different books published only in Czech, and there'll be an 8th one next year. And the most recent book was chosen by my Czech editors to be appeal to Czechs. It was translated by Czechs, and it was illustrated by Czechs, manufactured in the Czech Republic, and I began to think maybe I am a Czech citizen or something. And then I realized that I am a grandson of Yara Zimmerman. So that explains it, doesn't it?
We'll talk about the hero who didn't exist, and you are his grandson. But first, why do your posterity, children and grandchildren, call you Captain Kindergarten?
Well, they have no respect for me, and so they call me. I mean, if your father does something that you've heard all of your life, and you've seen him all of your life, and you find that other people think he's special, they say, "No, it's just my old man, Captain Kindergarten." So it's like that. But Captain Kindergarten is kind of a superhero image of a second rate, so that's why they call me that.
First, I heard your name
Yeah.
with the book Everything I Need to Know I Learned at the Kindergarten.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, that must have been, what a kindergarten it must have been. So what was your kindergarten like?
Well, I never went to kindergarten.
That's good to know.
I actually began school in the 1st grade because I could read when I went to kindergarten. And what I really mean by that is wherever you begin school, there are certain things that you are to learn there. Whether it's kindergarten, 1st grade, or even homeschool, when you are very young, there are things you need to know to be part of a civilized society. And that's what that means. All I really need to know, everybody in this room learned very young what they need to do to live a life in society. It's not news. I just put it down on paper, but everybody looked at it and thought, oh yeah, that's true.
The basics.
Yeah.
The fundamentals.
Yeah, clean up your own mess. You look at the values of the colors of Ostrava and the Meltingpot, and the deal is to keep things clean. And you have 1 cup. You don't just throw them all away. You have 1 beer cup for the whole festival. You put your trash in all the recycling things. I mean, this is still based on what we learned when a kid. You make a mess, you clean it up, or you don't make a mess. This is a civilized world.
So you didn't go to kindergarten, and I thought about me learning something in the kindergarten.
Yeah. Well, you probably know things I don't know.
Well, I don't know about you, but the only thing I remember from the kindergarten there was this goddess of winter called Morana, and we went with children to throw Morana in the river, and that's all I remember, so I find it difficult.
Well, you need to go back to kindergarten and get another set of lessons, yes. I did remember that, well, I went to kindergarten very briefly because I could read, and so they put me in first grade. But one of the things I learned to do was to take care of guinea pigs and hamsters and small animals, and that's where you're introduced to these small creatures. I thought we were raising them to eat them. I didn't know that they were pets.
Do people often ask you about your family, what your family was like, where you grew up?
Well, the truth is, growing up, I started out living on a ranch in Texas, only child, no brothers or sisters, and nobody close by. So in many senses, my storytelling began with my entertaining myself by creating an imaginary world and imaginary friends, and it's the thing that a lot of people who grew up as an only child learn to do. You create your world. Then when you go to school and they have show and tell us a story, well, I'm prepared, I can do this. I grew up in a dysfunctional family, mother and father. Father didn't want children, mother was not happy with life. And so I was very much, from early on, a solitary person. And to this day, while I enjoy being with people and I'm really comfortable in a social situation, I'm very happy alone and being solitary. One of the reasons that I come to a place like this is because when I write, I think, who's going to read this? Who are these people? It's the same when I read. I wonder, who is this person writing this? And I come here and I have pictures now. So this winter when I'm writing and I wonder, who is going to read this? I think, oh, I've got these pictures of these Czechs in Ostrava on a rainy Saturday in July, and some of them will probably read what I'm writing, so I better think of them. So you've become real to me. And when you read my books, you can think, oh, I remember that guy in his black shirt and his polka dot thing. He was real, and we are real for one another. That's important to me.
You've been traveling for a while, the Czech Republic,
yes.
Almost like a rock and roll band or something, because people gather to know you.
I can't dance like Mick Jagger yet.
Yet.
He's going to be a father again. His oldest child is like 50 years old, and now he's going to have a baby. My God. Good on Mick.
So that's the thing with the rock stars,
yeah,
right?
That's not my style. No.
But yet, what are your impressions of the country you've traveled, so diligently?
Well, I know that I connect to the Czech Republic because I find a combination of an understanding and appreciation of a recent dark history of repression, of war, of being dominated by ideology, and somehow surviving that. There have been some very dark times recently in this country. And a lot of people think about that very seriously still. At the same time, the Czechs really know how to party. And the combination of being able to think and to be able to party is a rather remarkable combination. But that's why this festival works. You've got all the music you could want. I've got a pass that I can get all the free beer I want. And at the same time, you can do all the thinking about important things that you want to do, all in the same place. There's nothing like this in the world, and it's happening in the Czech Republic.
Have you thought about what is it that clicked between you and the Czech audience? Because not every writer is, getting such popularity here.
Well, it's the same mentality. I have a very serious side to me. A lot of what I write, just because of that word kindergarten, it gets in the way. A lot of what I write is about very serious things. It's about death, it's about loneliness, it's about having children, all those, and about history. And at the same time, I don't know where I get it, but I have a sense of humor. I love to laugh, I love jokes. So to mix the serious with the humorous seems to be compatible with the Czech mentality. And these are my people, and I am their guy. So you have to ask them why, but you can't imagine a hall that's full like this that somehow I don't represent something very important to them that's inside them. Not me, it's them.
We had this picture of a small guy growing up in Texas.
Yes.
By himself, perhaps with head full of narratives, stories.
Yeah.
What were the stories you remember, just taking your imagination, that you thought, this is good to narrate, to tell?
Well, that's a very hard question for me to answer. I can remember having 5 or 6 imaginary friends. Now that I'm in my 80th year, and I knew those when I was 4 and 5, I can't remember everything about them. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm all alone, excuse me, I hadn't thought about this before. I wonder where they are. What happened to those people? I'd love to know. I'd love to say, hi, don't forget me, I'm still here. But I haven't thought about this in a long time. What happened to those imaginary people? I don't know. But I remember how important it was that they were in my life. Maybe now I should invent some more imaginary people and have a whole other experience.
What was the first contact with Czech culture, with translators, maybe publishers? With Eva Slámová, we have to mention her.
Well, in 1989, there was a revolution, and publishing all of a sudden in the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia as it was then, could publish anything in English that they wanted. And so, as I understand it, the books that were at the top of the New York Times bestseller list were bought by Czech publishers because they thought those are published, and we need to immediately connect with what's popular. So a very, very wonderful person, Eva Slámová, she died of cancer several years ago. She was brilliant as in choosing, and we became not just a publisher and editor, we became good friends. I really loved her, and vice versa. And it's funny, I said I don't know if he's here or not, but I said to my publisher, Milan Gelner, that we're talking contracts on Monday, serious business. And I said, don't worry, we are family, and we will stick together and support each other. I don't know why I'm so emotional about this, but these are important human values. These are not about business. It's not about electronics. It's about being real and human. So,
did you know anything about Czechoslovakia or Czechs before you were contacted whether you will sell rights to your books here?
In an odd way, yes. I knew about the Czech Republic from very young because growing up in Texas, there were a great many Czech immigrants who came through Galveston and moved into communities, farming communities. So I would go with my father to get smoked meat and to get bread and kolaches and all kinds of good stuff and Czech beer. And so I didn't think about that being a country. That were the people who lived in the town close by. And then when I grew older, I loved to dance. And so I learned to dance to a lot of music that I thought was Czech's music. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So the second time I came to the Czech Republic, I was taken to a folk music festival. And the people who were in the program were in the foyer, and they were dancing with people as we came in the door. And I thought, my God, they know Texas music. And I just jumped in, and I danced polka and schottisch and waltz and the whole thing. I said, where did you learn Texas music?
And they eat kolache.
I did, yeah, I danced. I can do it. They pulled me up on stage to dance polka. There is a small accordion that came from Bohemia that was brought to the United States and now is a big part of American musical culture. We call it conjunto, which is Tex-Mex music. Right. And then there's Zydeco music, which is black and white music in Louisiana. And then there's Cajun music. And they all use the same accordion, which has its roots here. So I think that's maybe why I'm comfortable with Czechs. There's good music, and I know it, and there's good dancing, and I know it, and there's good beer, and I know it. So, no, think about it. Most of the beer that is consumed in the southern half of western part of the United States is Mexican beer. All kinds of Mexican beer is very popular. And guess where the brewers came from? The Czech Republic. So we're drinking Czech beer and don't really realize it.
You have mentioned this name. Our national hero
Yes.
is a person who's hardly in any pictures.
Yes. They say I look like him.
Now, what do you make of that story of Jara Zimmerman? When you first heard it, it's pretty unusual. You know, you have Abraham Lincoln and all those huge personas, and then we have Jara.
Well, as a child who grew up with imaginary friends, to come to a whole nation that had imaginary heroes, either they are as strange as I am, or we have something we understand.
So
let me say something serious about that. In order to make Jara Zimmerman an importance to a culture, the culture has to have two things: imagination and a sense of humor about themselves. And I think that people who can laugh at themselves with imagination are very, very important people. So,
can't people from Texas have it? Can't people from Texas?
I'm sorry?
Don't people from Texas laugh at themselves?
No, no. Texans take themselves very seriously. We are very important people. We are not funny. That's why I don't live in Texas anymore.
You're almost like Czech being born in Texas and then finding your own country later on.
It is. Well, you know, one of the things I say about myself is that I am a citizen of the world. And there are many places where we can fit in, and I have found a place that I fit in. I don't feel comfortable in, let's say, Poland, like I do here. Not that I have anything against the Polish or the Austrians, but I feel a sense of community here that it's unique. And I don't know why, except it's just my mindset fits with the Czech mindset. So I'm very proud to say to Americans, I've become a Czech author, you know. And what unites us, I think the most magnificent picture, if you've never seen it, is from a satellite in one of the telescopes. And you see what we look like from way, 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 way out in space. And we are this tiny, tiny little pinprick of blue against an infinite universe. And if you don't understand that we're all part of one situation, then you need to look at that photograph again. We are only as important as we're willing to become to each other.
I have always wanted to ask you, all your biographers mentioned that you worked as a pastor.
Yes.
Now, this is very
not very Czech.
It's not very Czech. We don't have we got any pastors here?
No hands. No. Oh, there's no. I'm the only one.
You're the only one. So maybe there is something we can learn about this. What is it? How did you come to become a pastor?
I've always been interested in religion because I grew up in a community that was very religious, and I had a lot of good experiences in a world that was Christian and very conservative. Mm-hmm. And once I moved out of that didn't mean that I needed to give up spiritual values. That didn't mean I needed to stop thinking about my place in the world and why am I here and what am I supposed to do. And just because you don't go to a particular church on Sunday doesn't mean that you are not a spiritual and religious person. I laugh at some Czechs because they say, oh, I'm not religious. And then I know enough about their lives and say, no, you have deep, deep values that you serve, and it's just a matter of language. I am a Unitarian, and the Unitarian root goes into somebody you just had a holiday for, Jan Hus. His ideas about religion are the roots of my own religion. So that's why I think the way Czechs think about religion is the way I think about religion. So it's very compatible.
I must admit you're Czech now because Americans say John Hus and you say Jan Hus.
Jan Hus, yeah,
that's
his name, right?
That's very Czech. Do you think that being a pastor, caring about people, maybe mentoring people, maybe being careful about what they think, whether they hurt themselves or not, is it somewhere present in your books?
Well, I went into the ministry with the thought of I wanted to be useful in the world. And being a minister meant that you had a key that would get you backstage into the world. And I was never full-time. I wanted to have access to be involved in the American civil rights movement in the South. And that gave me an access. So today, while I'm still technically a minister, I will do weddings from sometimes. I do funerals.
You can do weddings and funerals?
Yes, yes.
Did you know that?
Do you have somebody in mind?
Well, look at the audience. Not funerals, but weddings.
Well, this is kind of funny. There is a Unitarian church in Prague, and the minister would like to go away for a couple of months. So he said, why don't you come sit in my chair? And I thought, why not? So maybe next year you will look up and say, oh, he's now the minister of the Unitarian Church in Prague. I think that would be hilarious, but who knows? No, I think everybody needs, I need a vehicle to be useful. And for me, in the States, the Unitarian Church was that. But if I were to explain to this audience what Unitarians are about, you would say, oh, we know about that. That's part of our background. Yeah. Right. It's not something strange.
So you're a pastor. When was the time when you first, for yourself, said, I'm a writer. I make living by writing, and it's part of my identity?
Well, when I'm asked this question at writers' conferences, the writers end up going, oh, no. Because the truth is, I never thought about being a professional writer. Writing was a way I used to make sense out of my life and to try to make sense out of what the religious community I was involved in was wrestling with. At the same time, I was teaching in a high school, and I wanted to write things to my students beyond just speaking to them. So I was writing without thinking about becoming a professional writer. And a lot of things in the late 1980s that I wrote, people put in the underground press that were copied and put on refrigerators and office walls. And all of a sudden, things I was writing were all over the country. And so I was distributed, but not published in a sense. So one day, a lady from New York called, said, I'm a literary agent. And did you write this, All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten? Yeah. She said, do you have any more? And I said, I got boxes of this stuff. So she said, would you send me some? Yeah. So meantime, I have jobs. I'm not thinking about becoming a writer. And I was 50 at the time. And so about 3 months later, she came back and said, would you accept an insane amount of money to publish this book? And I said, of course, send me money. This is great. And a year later, all that material, which was in the kindergarten book, was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. So I thought, wow, I guess I'm a writer now. And when writers ask me, how do you get published? I'd say, I don't know. When they want you, they come and get you.
That just happens.
Yeah, it just happened. I did not apply. I never sent a manuscript. It just happened. So then the second book, I thought, oh, now I'm a writer. So I had to write a second book. And Now I can't stop. It's like a disease. I just keep writing and writing and writing.
And it puts human life in a very interesting perspective, because you became a writer when you were 50.
Yes. Well, I started getting paid for writing when I was 50.
For that box.
For that box, yes.
I think you had.
No. Well, you go back to what I said earlier. If you had wanted to be useful, now there's an opportunity to be useful in a much larger way. So I still think of what I'm doing in the same way. I want to be useful. I want to pass on my thinking to other people. And if that makes a difference to them, then I'm being useful in the world. I would love to sit on the edge of my grave someday and say, I left something behind.
You have mentioned a few times the word useful.
Yes.
Is it the way you think about your writing, that it should be useful? How useful, you mean?
Well, useful in one respect, in that I want to be able to say things out in paper that when people read it, they say, oh, I feel that way, or I think that, or I've done that. I am not alone. Somebody else in the world is thinking and feeling like I am. I think that's being useful for people to know that they're not the only one. When I get a response, then I know that I'm not alone. And look at this room full of people. How could I ever say I'm alone or lonely when people are here? I realize my emotions are very close to the surface today, partly because I'm exhausted from 6 weeks on the road.
You must be, yeah.
Partly it's very satisfying to end up this experience with a room full of people and know that we're people who have so much in common. And I won't go home feeling sad. I'm really, really grateful that you read my books and send me notes or say hello or stop me in the street. Or I think it's the saddest thing in the world to be lonely. And I think it's useful to help people not be. I have very strong feelings about political things, and so I am useful in the sense of money I contribute to causes. Right now in my own country, you're aware that we've gone absolutely berserk and crazy politically, and I'm very much involved in trying to get a better president elected than Mr. Trump.
Would you care commenting the situation now, how you see it?
Well, this is a lesson that the Czechs know. You never know what's going to happen. And you look back in modern history, Mussolini got elected. Hitler got elected. Communists got elected in this country. I mean, we do bizarre things that don't work out very well. And we think, well, this will never happen in America. Well, it could. And so, being very much involved in my country, I want to make sure that I'm working for Mrs. Clinton to be president. I don't want somebody like Donald Trump to represent my country to the world. So I don't write a lot about that, but I do a lot about that. So.
I don't want to delve into politics too much.
Yeah.
But for you, what's wrong with Donald Trump?
Well, you know the word demagogue. He represents saying to people there are simple answers to everything, and if you will give me total control, I will fix everything. And that's dictatorship. That's not democracy. So he represents that which is not democratic.
Right.
What bothers me is that there are people who will vote for him. And so we have the mood of a country goes up and down. Our country is frustrated, many people are, and so they want somebody with simple answers to complex problems. That's not going to happen. So it's a phase of American democracy, but it's dangerous right now.
We're talking with Czech writer here. When people do approach you after your reading, when you travel the Czech Republic, what do they usually want to talk about? About your writing, or what do they want from you?
You know, one of the loveliest things about doing book signings is that I've become to realize that a lot of people think they know me personally. So they will walk out and say, "Hi, it's me. Will you write this for my mom?" And you say, "Do I know your mom?" And they've acted as if I must know their mother's name because I know them. And people say, "Hi, I'm here. Would you sign my book?" And I say, "What's your name?" And they say, "Oh, it's like I should know." Well, that's a major compliment. People stop me in the street and talk to me like they've known me for a long time, and they will ask me or tell me things, and that's quite wonderful to have that connection.
Do you like talking about your literature? Because there are some writers who just don't like it to talk about what they have written. They just say, "Just please read it again. You don't need my comments." How do you feel about you talking about your stuff?
Well, most of the time when I talk about my writing, it's with an individual who wants to say, "You know the story you wrote about something, and I've had that," or "Tell me, I'd like to know more," or "That was important in my..." So those, I don't get involved in literary events to talk about writing in the abstract. I'm interested in living, and I'm interested in connecting with real people, not talking about literature as an abstraction. Not that that's wrong, but that's just what I do. Yeah. And I often say to people, "Well, you like my stories, tell me a story." One of the best times I ever had was a book that, I don't know what it is in Czech, but in English it's True Love. And I spent a year going around with a table and a sign, and it said, "Tell me a real, true love story, and I will make you famous." And I would sit in front of bars and taverns and coffee houses, and pretty soon there'd be a bunch of people standing around telling me more stories than I could possibly use, and laughing, and people saying, "Oh, that's nothing. Wait till you hear about my..." And like that. And it was the most wonderful experience. And then all the royalties from that, more than $2 million, went to Habitat for Humanity. So I just took their stories and put them in a book and added my own comments. That was a wonderful experience because everybody in this room has got at least one story that you really think that's your special story. You know that if you told it again in your family, they would say, "Oh, no, don't tell that again. That's the story I'm talking about. It's your best." Your father has one of these. You'd say, "No, Daddy's going to tell his story again." Well, but it's a great story, and I would love to collect. In fact, there's a book, the stories Daddy's told me that I don't want to hear again. But
can you remember a story that you thought was worthwhile, that you recently heard and you thought, this might be a good story to tell in writing?
Well, it just happened, and it happened partly here. I was wandering around Prague, and all of a sudden I saw there was a piano just out. I was in the place where all the theaters are, just sitting there. And then somebody walked up and sat down and started playing the piano. And I thought, who does the piano belong to? What's it doing there? Well, you know the story. I followed that up. There are pianos all over Prague, in many places, some painted, some not. Some I've gone to and people are playing, and somebody else has brought a violin, and there's music happening. I thought, how did this happen? So I started tracking it down, and I found out there was this guy who had the idea, and I met him last night here at Ostrava. And he's got curly hair, and Andres. And this morning, walking on the street all by myself, I ran into him again. So he's real, and he had this idea, and he did it. So that's where I get stories from. Right. I know him.
I must confirm that Ondřej Kobza is a real person walking somewhere. I don't know whether he's here or not, but he is real. True.
Yeah.
He's got all sorts of weird ideas that would make a good book.
Well, my notion about going around in the world is to have my senses open, to look, to listen, to think outside the obvious. Every situation has an opportunity, and you never know. But if you don't notice, then you won't. I'm overwhelmed with material from this last 6 weeks. I could write, well, I do. I have a book coming out of being here for 6 weeks. a lot of it is just ordinary things that I think, oh, this is... I'll give you a good example. Last night, it was raining, muddy, and there in a wheelchair, one of those amazing electric wheelchairs, there was a man. I don't know why he was in the wheelchair, but he was seriously disabled. He could hardly touch the machinery that made it. But he was by himself. He had come by himself. He was willing to have people help him get upstairs, but he was willing to go around those grounds last night by himself. If you want to know, is there courage in the world, you have to see somebody like that. And I went up and thanked him. I said, thank you for being on this earth. That's what's right in front of us. So.
If I understood well, you invited those people to tell you the stories they find interesting, and you will make them a book later on, maybe? Perhaps? Well,
that's how true love came. I'm just saying that almost anybody I sit down with, I can say, you've got 2 or 3 stories in your life that you think are just killer. They have a point, or they make people laugh, and they will tell the story to me. And it's usually better than anything I could ever make up. And so I always attribute it. I never lie, but I always take pieces of the truth and say, this could be true, but it's not all mine.
What makes a good story for you? What does a story have to have in order to be good, grasping?
My favorite stories of my own that I write have to do with seeing something that I had not thought about and realizing how important it in fact was, even though if it's small. And then taking that and seeing the humor in it. I'm interested, for example, if you walk around the colors of Ostrava, you see a lot of people have a T-shirt on. And some of the things the T-shirts say are really strange. Like I just saw one in English, very beautiful young woman said, on their T-shirt says, "My boyfriend is away for the weekend." And I thought, I wonder what she wants me to do in response to that. And this is advertisement. She put that shirt on purpose, not by accident. Nobody made her wear it or come. And you've all, in fact, if I could probably go through this audience and find 20 T-shirts and say, what the hell does that mean? Why are you wearing that? And it's serious in the sense that people choose to say, this is me. It's also very funny because you wonder if they really looked in the mirror and thought about what people were going to think. So those kinds of stories where something very serious, in fact, is going on, this is the way I present myself to the world. At the same time, the world may see it as really, really funny. I think sometimes being alive in the world is like being in a comic strip. You know, the humor is just everywhere. Or look at me. You know, I look very serious. I look very respectable. But I have this lovely scarf. It's a look. I'm saying, this is Robert Fulghum. And people will say, he's a funny-looking old man, isn't he? So that's the serious and the humorous are what I get my stories from.
I see a T-shirt saying whatever.
Pardon?
I see a T-shirt saying whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
Whatever.
I like that. Well, this right there, front row. Yeah. Whatever. Why did you put that shirt on this morning? Whatever, you know. What would you like for me to do in response to seeing your shirt? Whatever. Whatever, yeah. Could we talk after the show? Maybe. I saw what, this is funny. I was on a tram in Prague, and there's a lady had a T-shirt on, and it said, "Baby on board." And she looked absolutely as flat as I did. So I said to her, "How long have you been pregnant?" And she said, "About 2 hours." And then she said, "I'm really tired. Would you get up so I could sit down?"
That could never happen in Texas, right? A part of sense of humor, which is obvious. What qualities do you appreciate in people? What qualities of character?
Well, people who have the same values as I do, if you move away from the kindergarten creed and ask me, okay, Fulghum, how do you really run your daily life? I would say at the top of my list is do no harm. And I'm aware of my capacity to do harm, to be rude, to be unpleasant, but my top priority in the world is to do no harm. And I find people who have that, I relate to immediately. And my second thing, the way I really run my life, is to be kind. I've never in my life been sorry for being generous, never. I have often been sorry when I wasn't. So I try very hard to be generous. Give you an example. I was in Prague and this waiter was just really rude. He was just unpleasant and I felt like getting up out of my chair and punching him. And then I thought, I wonder what's going on in his life. So I went over and said to him, you seem very unhappy. And he said, my father died this morning. Well, what harm for me to be generous? So that's something. Another thing I run my life on a serious daily basis, think about it all the time, is that every situation contains opportunities if you look for it. There's always something you can make out of any opportunity. So that's very important. And another thing I run my daily life on is the notion that if I go in the world being concerned about what I need, what I want, then I will never be fully satisfied. If I go about in the world thinking how much I could give to what other people need and want, there will always be enough. And I know sometimes I don't manage to do that, but that's what I try to do. So that when I meet people, first thing I say is, you know a lot about me, tell me about you. And I mean by that, how can I contribute something to your life? And I have learned the hard way, if I don't do that, I will be sorry.
So we know that we shouldn't be egoistic, that we should appreciate people, be generous, but what if we are not? How do we handle ourselves? What do we do?
Well, we all know when we don't live up to our best values that we don't feel good about ourselves. And I like to go to bed at night feeling I'm okay, at least. The last thing I do, this is serious, I've never told anybody this in public. The last thing I do at night when I'm in the bathroom before I go to bed, and I look in the mirror and I look at myself, and if I can say, okay, I go to bed well. And if I go to thinking, oh, God, you did it again, then those are bad days. But the good day is when I can look at myself just before I go to bed and say,
I'll remember that.
Not always easy.
Your latest book,
yes,
that is going to be signed, but not here,
yes,
in the next room. We
yes,
promised to tell that.
Okay.
After we do the talking, then your latest book is going to be in the next room.
Right.
Was chosen by Czech editors,
yes,
was printed in the Czech Republic,
yes,
book for Czechs, done by Czechs.
yeah.
How do you feel about that? Is it part of you being a Czech writer?
Well, it was, as I said, I began to think of Argo, the publishers, as part of my family, and I trust them. We do very sloppy things legally, but on a real important basis, we've always done the right thing by each other. And so I thought I would like to know, from their point of view, what of my writing appeals to what I don't understand about being Czech. So it was a statement of trust in my publisher. And the story they used at the beginning of the book and the illustration and the title surprised me. I wasn't had any problem with it, but it just surprised me. I would not have chosen that. Then I looked at it and I thought, oh, I get it. I understand why they chose that. We had such fun. We can do this tonight, but the first story is called Crisis in the Cheese Aisle. And I don't know how that translates in Czech, really, but if you think about it, it's about a little boy, and he's throwing a fit while his mother is trying to shop for cheese. And and I thought, watching this, that kid is going to be sorry. She's going to drop him on his head or stomp him or something, but she's going to really do something awful to him. So we wanted to play this to an audience. So I said, okay, here's one of the actors is going to be the little boy, and another actor is going to be the mother, and the audience has to pretend that they are the cheese.
The cheese?
The cheese.
How do you
So
pretend?
this was the brie cheese over here, and this is the Dutch cheese over here, and this was
Anyway cheese.
And then I got over here to the Olamos cheese, and they didn't want to do it because it stinks. So there was a rebellion from the Olamos cheese group. It's crazy, but we did it. But I knew that Czechs would do this because they are players. So I can say I've performed with a really cheesy audience.
You mentioned the word trust or faith, that legally faith comes first and then the legal things with Argo.
Yes.
Is it with people, when you approach people, there comes first investment of trust or faith, and then if this is not the right investment, you just go somewhere else? Or is it first you have to have an experience and then you trust people?
My attitude is to essentially convey to people the fact that I am willing to trust you. If you prove untrustworthy, then that's another issue. But we begin by saying, I trust you. You and I had never met, but just by shaking hands and looking at you, I thought, I am willing to trust this man, that he will not put me in an awkward or embarrassing position. And then, very early on, did you feel that I was saying, I trust you and let's work together?
When I came, I thought, this is going to be awkward. There is a hall full of people, and there's going to be this star backstage, and he's going to be distracted, and everybody will be taking pictures with him. And then we talked, and I saw peace. And you said something interesting, because from my profession, I know it's true. You said, this is not going to be easy, but it's not going to be rocket science. Somewhere in the middle.
Yes. Well, I talked to you about appropriate anxiety. That if you think you're just going to walk out on stage and knock them dead, you're in trouble. If on the other hand you think, I'm scared to death if I go out there, those people are going to eat me, you're in trouble. So if you have an edge of saying, I have a responsibility to do the best I can for the people who've come and honored me with their trust, then everything will be fine. So
how are we doing now?
Oh, I'm not going home until midnight, so you just no. I thank the audience for making me feel so much at home. I am very carefully looking at your faces to get some kind of sense of comfort. And when I look, I'm looking at your faces now, and you're looking at me and say, yeah, we could go have coffee together, right? And we drink. So it's important to me to look at people's faces. And when I speak all alone, I usually pick out half a dozen people and I talk to them and look at their faces like I'm looking at yours, and he's smiling, and I'm looking at yours and yours. And that, I think that affects the whole audience.
We have already used the term Fulghum mania, like Beatlemania. How do you handle that thing? Because you don't want to be rude, you want to be patient. You have like a few hundred stories to be told tonight. Yes. So how do you handle it?
Well, it's not always easy because you have a lot of expectations that people have of you. But I think of it, first of all, you have to go back to my saying, this is not something I sought. I did not want to be a famous and successful writer. So it's like being in a play, in a theater, in a small town, and you're in a show, and it goes on and begins to run and be successful. So you are an actor in that theater, but everybody knows that at the end of the show, you have to take off your makeup and your costume, and you go home and go to bed and use the toilet and eat like everybody else. And so you've agreed to play to perform a role in society, as to represent something that's projected onto you. And you have to have the courage sometimes to give an immaculate performance and say, I will be as much Robert Fulghum as I can be for people who have an expectation of that. For me, I also want to go off stage and have coffee with, I had a wonderful time today. A young woman wanted to have an interview with me. She was shaking all over. She was so nervous. So I put my hands on her and I talked to her and I asked her about her. Pretty soon it wasn't about me anymore. We were talking about her. And I thought, that's the person I want to be. I don't want to be the Mick Jagger of Czech literature. I want to be just Robert Fulghum.
Do you see your life as a play?
I see the world as theater.
Yeah. Václav Havel would agree with you, the Czech president?
Yes, I met him. I had a wonderful, he was publishing a book the same time I was. And I thought he would be a foot taller than I was. He was a small man, very gentle, very quiet. But we talked about that. He said, I had never thought in the theater that I would play the role of Václav Havel, but I'm doing that as well as I can.
Now, seeing that play, I know this is an awkward or tough question, but who's Robert Fulghum in that play? What sort of character is he? What's his story?
Well, I hope I'm the same person in private as I am in public. And everybody has their dark side. There are times when I get unhappy, when I get angry, when I get confused, when I get lost. I'm a whole human being, and you can't say anything better or worse about me. But I am someone who strives under all conditions to be authentically a real person. And I would hope that if you lived next door to me in Greece, where I spend a lot of time, and you see me here, you would find that's the same guy. That's terribly important and not easy sometimes.
So you talk about integrity.
Yeah, integrity, yeah. I'm very uncomfortable, for example, that I have this solid gold pass because it says that...
That's the beers you get.
Colors, golden VIP, and I keep it in my pocket. It embarrasses me because I don't think I should get free beer any more than they should. Don't you think you should all get free beer? She's covered up her whatever shirt.
I noticed. Whatever disappeared. That's right. That's right.
I'm watching. No, it's hard, but this is hard for everybody. Think of all the roles you play. You're a parent, you're a child, you have a job, you have friends, and all of those small theaters of life, you would like to be authentic. It's no different problem for me than for all the people in this room. You want people to think of you as a person who has integrity. And I think that's a human issue, not a literary phenomena. So Fulghum mania is crazy, but...
Yeah. What kind of feeling is that you wrote something and then you're now touring with sort of a circus almost, literary circus, sharing those stories?
Well, keep in mind that it's sort of, I'm trying to think of a metaphor for this. I have an experience in life. I can condense it into words, gets published, and then I go on stage with Listovani, the actors, and they reconstitute it. They bring it back to life. Is Lukáš here? Where is Lukáš?
Lukáš was backstage somewhere.
He's right there. So stand up. Stand up, Lukáš. This man and I have been together for 6 weeks on the road, day and night, and we are still friends. And he has brought my writing to life. And to say that I love him is true. You can take that to the bank.
We've heard it. Lukáš Haley. I'm afraid we have to stop here because there must be time for that Fulghum mania with signing.
Can I say something? very personal to all of you. You have no idea how important you are to me. That you read my work, that you find it meaningful or useful, that you pass it on to other people, that you exist 10 time zones away from where I live, so that when I get up in the morning, you're still going to bed, and when you get up in the morning, I'm going to bed, and yet I think about you. And for a long time from now, when I go to bed at night, I will think about the lady in the front row with whatever on her shirt, and think that pretty well takes care of the whole Czech singing, whatever. Thank you so much for coming.
Robert Fulghum.